Okay, I am pleased to be joined by Dallas of privacypost.io. Dallas, welcome to the Watchman Privacy Podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great.
Excellent. So, we're going to talk about what Privacy Post is, and I have Dallas here with me. He's graciously agreed at the beginning of this episode to walk us through the importance of virtual mailboxes as a privacy option, particularly in South Dakota. And we're going to start by going through why you might be interested in that. And as we go along, and especially at the end of or the second half of the show, we'll talk specifically about privacypost.io and what that offers us. And I'll just shout out Dallas right now. He's one of these people who's not waking up complaining about privacy on Twitter. He's waking up and he's making a difference in the world. He's a business guy and entrepreneur, and he has an excellent product. And so shout out to him for actually doing something to help our privacy. Okay, so Dallas, I wanted to appeal to your knowledge of having created this service and some knowledge in Nomad Residency in South Dakota. And so I just want the audience to bear with me as I start with the basics. So if one is interested in privacy, then one needs to begin with protecting one's real address. In other words, the place where you go to sleep at night. So even if you do what I suggest in my guide and be careful not to connect yourself to your address in any reckless way via your internet or mobile phone use, you still have to give out an address to many companies. And this is where we get to virtual addresses, which are addresses that are tied to your name and can receive things for you, can act as an address for you, but which are not where you go to sleep at night. So in the interest of reducing the third parties that know your real address, you can use these virtual addresses. So for example, I talk in my guide about taking out a mailbox or a UPS box. This is a good start, but they do have some problems. A mailbox, USPS mailbox, or a UPS box can usually not stand as a fully legitimate address. What do I mean by that? Well, in most cases, it's not going to be permitted as an address for a driver's license, for example, or for a bank account. These mailbox services, are in databases of known mail receiving agencies and can thus be discriminated against. And these services have other problems as well. They're not going to forward your mail to you. They might not accept all packages from all carriers. They're bound by strict regulations regarding who can apply for one. Sometimes you have to show proof of address in your area. They can be very picky about the name on the package or the envelope. But the main thing here is that if you want an address, that can be used as a fully functioning alternative to your real address for banking, for residency reasons, for your fulfillment by Amazon business, or for other serious concerns. You need a better option. And that's where a different category of virtual mail services comes in. And one such category is PMBs, which can be used for these more important purposes. And so, just kind of to start, Dallas, have I got this right so far? Anything you would like to add?
You did. I don't know every state, but you're correct. There are some states that don't allow a PMB. Let's just call, all of the private mailboxes, just generally speaking, PMB. They definitely do not allow PO box, but some states will not allow a PMB for your driver's license. South Dakota, however, does allow a PMB for your driver's license. So just to throw that out there. But yes, that is a challenge when it comes to this. When people are trying to get their home address, their place where they sleep, that's their residence. Yes, it's more challenging.
What are some other reasons why we, as privacy or sovereignty seekers, might want to have or use a virtual mailbox, especially maybe a more legitimate one like a PMB?
Right. Well, okay. So one thing that I recommend here, and I'll answer your question, but maybe a little more. I won't go down too far down the rabbit hole. But what's really important is finding a PMB. What I recommend is people, you got to crawl before you walk and run. Um, and it may make more sense to if depending on your situation in your locality, you've got kids in school there, you're anchored to that area. It may make more sense at this time to go with something close and local and find a place to have as your virtual address. The smaller the place you go to, like many of our privacy strategies, if you go more local, more independent, they are going to be more trusting, and they're going to have less one size fits all guidelines and rules on how your mail will be received and your aliases you can use and what do they do with the 1583. Do they have to take a photocopy of your driver's license and your passport and then give it to the post office? All those variables. When you work local and you get to know the people that you want to have a relationship with to help you with your privacy, and I can give a few more tips on this too that are directly related to that strategy. It is absolutely critically important to do that. Have all of your Amazon go there, all everything you order and so forth go to that virtual mailbox. And I think I don't, maybe it was you mentioned this, maybe not, where even like you're ordering specific accessories for your weapons or something, and you can easily get profiled when, and now that visas, with gun purchases and stuff, they're flagging them, identifying them, having them go to a specific VMB. I think it's very critical to do that.
Yeah, so there are all kinds of uses for a PMB, and just to kind of sell this to people as an option you should really consider, because I think for certain segments of the privacy audience, they'll listen to this and they're thinking, have an address that's far from my house. Like what? Why would I do this? Let me just give a couple more examples. So let's say that, of course, when you have a major financial account, you have to give a real address, and as we said, this has to be a legitimate address that is more than a UPS box. And so let's say that you have a Kraken account, and which you don't because you follow my Bitcoin privacy course at bitcoinprivacycourse.com. But if you did, then you would, and let's say Kraken got breached, well, then your home address is floating around online, and people know that this person at this address has some Bitcoin. They know where you live. Or think of this with any other a leaked account of yours, your medical records, your investing account, your bank accounts. All of these are vulnerabilities. All of these have to have an address tied to them. And these vulnerabilities stack on top of each other, and they do end up getting breached, and they end up on shady parts of the internet. The address that you give out ends up with your credit reporting agency, right? Equifax, Experian, with your DMV, right? We know that Florida has sold this data quite publicly in the past, and it gets spread around. And that's the reason why you have these huge people search databases where I, as an OSINT practitioner, can type in your name into one of dozens of websites and figure out a lot of information about you, including where you live. So, a virtual mailbox allows you to give out an address without fear that it comes back to bite you. And that's the privacy benefit in a nutshell. And there are other benefits as well, which we shall discuss. Moving kind of to the next stage here, Dallas. So a virtual mailbox, such as a PMB, can also provide a legitimate address for one to get residency in a different state. So you can change your residency to a state that you have not been to and don't plan to return to except to renew your driver's license. And you can benefit from the laws and characteristics of this new state, such as, for example, a zero state income tax state. This is not all states. You have to pick particular states that might be friendly to this kind of lifestyle, that are friendly, for example, to RVers, such as South Dakota. And so, Dallas, tell me about South Dakota. Why is this random state a special place for nomad residences and consequently for virtual mailboxes? Why did you set up Privacy Post in South Dakota?
Yeah. Okay. So South Dakota, is on the top of my list in many lists. I would say the top four for residency for location independent people is Texas, Florida, South Dakota, and a lot come from Nevada because they're right next to California. So I chose South Dakota when I first started my journey, which was 6 or 7 years ago. Before this really was a thing, at least at the time, I didn't realize it was a thing. I was just going by all by intuition, and I did it because it was they had the least amount of resistance to go into the state and get your residency. And even though I am not what's called a full timer, an RV person, I talked to a lot of people who are, and they all said South Dakota, South Dakota, South Dakota. So then I did my research, and I'm like, okay, it looks like South Dakota is the place to go and place to be. So that's what started my journey going to South Dakota and doing this. And as you probably already know, your requirements to go there is just one night in a hotel in that year, and have the receipt with your name and your new South Dakota address, and you're good to go. You have residency, and you go into the DMV, and you have your driver's license, plastic driver's license, in your hand within an hour, and you walk out and you have your driver's license. That's it.
Right, and other states are not as allowing of that. They're not as forgiving. You go to other states hoping to get a driver's license with a PMB address, and they might flat out reject you. So South Dakota, they profit from this. South Dakota profits from allowing RVers to pay their fees every year to the DMV and then go about their business. And so South Dakota has an incentive to keep this going, and that's where it generates a lot of its revenue because it doesn't have a state income tax, and so it gets its revenue in other ways such as this. So there is some longevity to this. So becoming a South Dakota nomad resident is it's possible for anyone in the United States. There's a process that you go through that involves, as Dallas said, some paperwork, a trip to the DMV in South Dakota to get your driver's license. You also need to get your license plates and registration for your vehicles transferred over to South Dakota. And then it involves you surrendering your old driver's license. And then you need to behave like a South Dakota resident. If you want to keep the nomad status, you'll want to avoid having a physical presence in another state, whether that's a house or an apartment or anything that could be construed as you spending a significant part of the year there. So I want to say that this process, it's not that difficult. Anybody can do it, but you have to be prepared to act like a nomad in order to benefit from this, and it's all perfectly legal too.
Yes, correct. It is, and that's where I think people can kind of go into that gray area where they kind of pick and choose what they want to the benefits they want, for their lifestyle or whatever. That they'll go to South Dakota, get their residency there and stuff, and pay the state taxes, but they kind of are trying to stay under the radar in an expensive state. Let's say Illinois or something like that, under the radar with the South Dakota plates and South income taxes, and so they're not paying state income tax, but yet they have all those other, they don't pass the litmus test for all those other variables that in Illinois would really, if they did get flagged, they're going to ask those questions, and they ain't gonna be able to prove that they do not live there in Illinois.
Right. If you have a house that's in your name in Chicago and you're trying to say, "Oh, I'm a South Dakota resident," that's not going to fly. You will get noticed eventually, and you will probably have to pay back taxes and things of this sort.
Yep, and the biggest time they're going to catch you is when you sell it. And you say, "Oh, my capital gains on this? No, no, no. I don't have. No, I'm in I'm a South Dakota resident." That's where that's mostly when people get caught, is when they their capital gains, to write that off or not claim it in that state. Um, then it gets a little sticky.
Yeah, and so in a nutshell, right, the benefits of being a South Dakota resident through using a virtual mailbox are that you can start using that address for everything, for your banks, all your accounts. Right, it's your new address while you yourself go about wherever you're going to go. And of course, the no income tax of South Dakota has its advantages as well. You're still paying federal income tax. That's not something you ever mess with whatsoever. Just kind of sticking to the basics here, Dallas. So to get a PMB in South Dakota, there are a lot of options out there. To begin this process, right, to get your PMB address so that you can apply for your South Dakota residency, you have to fill out some forms, right? There's a process. What are the forms that one has to do to what are we giving out in the process of, let's say, becoming a South Dakota resident?
Okay, so it would be probably similar to all the other virtual services that when you search via virtual mailbox in the top three or four. I've been with many South Dakota virtual mail or PMBs, and so I know pretty much the big ones. There's what their processes are, and you do an intake form with your physical address and stuff like that. Then they will have you fill out a 1583. It's a USPS form that identifies you, and then with your identifications, they need two identifications, one with a photo, and those are the two primary things that they're going to collect. They're also going to collect a credit card, which we do not. They typically like to have a credit card on file, which I do not like to give out, so that they can just, when your account for your mailing gets to 25, they want to throw another 50 in it, so forth. And then they also know all of your forwarding addresses. that you're going to be forwarding to. And then they usually have all of this in their cloud system, per se, if you want to call it that, where they manage all of this information and store your mail. And if you're doing the virtual mail where you can view it anywhere in the world, then they have that there as well. Now they probably have the back end stuff separate. Your 1583 and all the other stuff is maybe separate, but your credit card, so you can go ahead and change that and update your billing, and your forwarding addresses and all of your mail are in that cloud system. So they have all that information.
Right. And so this is a popular process, especially for RVers to get residency in South Dakota. So there are a lot of big businesses out there that offer virtual mailboxes. What Dallas has done with Privacy Post is from the ground up to have privacy features built in there. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I just kind of want to emphasize that from the start. And so, Dallas, we've been talking about the kind of the personal residence of the South Dakota Nomad process and virtual addresses. So can Privacy Post be used as an address for one to get personal residence in South Dakota?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So what you do is you take your invoice for your mailbox service, and there's specific wording that they need on there that you physically forward the mail. It's not just virtual only. And then they do have like an unofficial database of approved PMBs, and if and they check that list, and if you're not in the list, they may make a phone call to that company like they did to us in the beginning, because I was unaware of that list, and then just make sure that they need very clear that on the website or on the invoice that it says that that the mail is physically forwarded, because I guess there are some services that are just scanning everything and sending it into the cloud, and they don't accept those for residency. So that is important to understand that's most of them do this and know that, but just be aware of that if if you're changing to an address that doesn't have that clarified in the documents that you have. So you could use our address for exactly that, for your residency, and that's the key feature of what we provide.
Right. And for those of you who want to look up this while you're listening, it's privacypost.io. And so Dallas, the virtual mailbox in South Dakota, Privacy Post and the others that we've talked about, it's not just for personal use, we can use it for business use. So why might somebody, let's say somebody's not interested in going through this crazy nomad route, why might somebody be interested in South Dakota solely from a business perspective or another perspective besides just personal nomad residency?
Okay, two of them would be trusts and business, and they kind of can for similar reasons. People think that, oh, I need to create an LLC or a business if I have this big business plan and so forth, and it's my primary. I suggest even as a side gig, or a side hustle, if you are starting to do some entrepreneurial endeavors, you should and need to create an LLC, and that also then creates a layer of privacy for those endeavors, and you can use that LLC as a shield, including the EIN, as many people in the privacy realms talk about using an EIN as an SSN. So doing it in South Dakota is so easy, and it is a very frictionless, and you can create an LLC in South Dakota with absolutely nothing identifying you as the owner within the registration and the public record of South Dakota from the Secretary of State. Now, there's a couple guidelines you need to follow, and probably out of scope for this call. Um, there's some We have a step-by-step process to help people with that if they don't have a South Dakota lawyer helping them with that, and we do advise people to have legal advice. But if it's a simple LLC, it's pretty straightforward to do. So having those is really big, and as people in the privacy world talk about having you're working for a typical having a typical career, a typical job, a day job, that is a huge compromise in our privacy. And people who really want to go that privacy route, they need to become independent. They need to be independent contractors. They need to be sole proprietors. They need to have complete control of their privacy, so they don't have a company telling them that they need to be on LinkedIn, or they need to have this social media presence, or you need to disclose all this information to work here, or so forth. Um, that is really important if you are on a journey for your privacy, you really need to be thinking about your side hustle and what you want to do to be able to survive. And so moving that into South Dakota is a great opportunity.
Why would somebody consider South Dakota for an LLC when they could, let's say, do it in their home state or do it in one of the four states where your name is not put on the in the on the public record, such as Wyoming, New Mexico, Delaware, Nevada?
Yeah, that would be a question with if you have either legal advice or accountants helping you do your formation. A lot of times, if you're dealing with an accountant, a CPA, or whatever in your state, they're comfortable with that state, and they're just going to say, just do it here. But if you have a more, I don't know, bigger picture professionals helping you, they would probably look at the different states and figure out which one would be the best for you and your situation or whatever. Personally cannot speak to that. I do know, there's been some changes in Wyoming and stuff, and it may be too geographically. Where are you? If you're in Arizona and you're close to a state that meets these similar requirements, you may want to do it in that state. You know, but for me, it's South Dakota makes the most sense for me.
Right. And I think if you're considering South Dakota, then you should probably understand what it takes to become a South Dakota resident and become one, and then take advantage of some of this stuff as well. I think that would be that could be part of the process. Just briefly, trusts. I noticed that you emphasize that trust formation.
Yeah, so I am proficient with the strategy of using trusts like for a vehicle for low value revocable trusts. Okay, when it comes to estate planning and legacy planning and all of that, I don't even pretend to specialize in that. And that really, you need special lawyers for that, CPAs. But when someone has a vehicle, they want to not have that vehicle in their name. One of the strategies is to create a trust and then take the vehicle that you own, and that's very important. It's easier to do this if you own the vehicle. Put it in a trust, and then that vehicle is now no longer identified to you. It kind of is, but there's a little bit more of a shield of your privacy when you have it in a trust. But the important thing is when you do that is the trustee, who is the trustee, and you got to make sure you do that strategy correctly so that you're shielding. So a lot of people, they don't want to have a trustee, or they don't feel comfortable asking someone to be the trustee, so that they have to then you be the self-managed trust, and then they are the trustee as well. There are strategies to shield the trustee because they do need to have the trustee on the title. Some counties do, some counties don't. We can talk about how that's different in South Dakota with when it comes to the titling and registration. But so that's why a person would really want to have a trust, is to take property, maybe a second home, or something like that, and have, or even their primary home, and put it into a trust to then shield that property of the owner of that property, of who really owns it.
I was thinking, Dallas, that the South Dakota virtual mailbox is also useful for international people as a privacy strategy. Is that right?
Exactly, and that's actually one of our specialties because I am an expat myself. I teach and preach about the importance of choosing the correct state for domicile when you become a international. If you live internationally, if you become, if you really maximize what's called geographic arbitrage, and you go international, choosing the right state is very important. In many, many different levels, and that could be a whole different episode. And most people who expat, they do not think about that. They're like, hey, my state, yeah, they got high state taxes, but if I'm out of the state for more than 6 months out of the year or out of the country, I don't have to pay taxes. So I'm just going to keep my domicile in Massachusetts. And they are really, really making a big mistake by doing that. Any CPA that's worth their fees will say you really need to strategize and get out of those what we call sticky states. They're sticky because they want to hold on to you. They want to keep you there to be paying taxes and stuff. And you, even if your income is not taxed because you're out of the state, you still have to pay. You still have to file taxes, and you have to then balance that out. And the other thing too is when your estate comes to the end, meaning your life comes to an end, they can be very sticky with what's passed down to your family, called the legacy. And so people really don't think about that as much as they should. So, long answer to a quick question.
No, it's a good point. And what I hope this episode does is to encourage people to reconsider where they are a resident and where they want to be a resident. You can, if your goal is to maximize your privacy and more importantly, your freedom, even your tax burden, you can choose where to be a resident. You can be a nomad, as we said, within the United States. You can also be an international nomad. And as long as you have a place, such as the kind of virtual boxes that we're talking about, a place for a legitimate address, you can use that to your advantage, and you can, and you should definitely consider that. On this topic, though, Dallas, because somebody out there is screaming, tax evader, right? What is the longevity of the South Dakota residency process? A lot of people are probably listening and saying, "Wow, I didn't realize I could do this." And recently, there was the Pandora Papers, which exposed, well, what one Russian lady said was, she was kind of diminishing it, trying to pushing it back on the U.S. But she said that billions of dollars in South Dakota belong to those accused of financial crime. So this is kind of the Russian propaganda. But the point was there was a lot of South Dakota that was exposed in the Pandora places as essentially, call it a tax haven. And so there's South Dakota, despite being this random state in the U.S., is on the international radar, especially as the result of these Pandora Papers. Is there any risk that the ability to use our geo arbitrage, have a residence in South Dakota, will be impacted in the future?
Okay, well, my opinion is probably very biased, but I don't think so, especially the level of clients that come into Privacy Post. No. And I do, in my opinion, I spent a lot of time devouring the Pandora Papers, and I found it very intriguing. And before that, the Panama Papers, And okay, I'm a little skeptical of the Pandora Papers. I do believe everything in there is accurate. I do believe that is factual information. However, I'm just a little surprised who they picked and choose to really disclose in the Pandora Papers. And I am a little suspicious that there are probably a lot of people that are probably maybe near and dear to our hearts than or whatever than in our society that have done the same strategy, and they just said, let's not expose this person. I just like, for example, you just didn't see any U.S. senators, any U.S. political figures, or that there were a couple minor little ones, or even European. It seemed like all of the people that were exposed were adversaries to the United States, and I'm just very skeptical of that. So, no, I'm not concerned about it. I'm sure that even the Pandora Papers, there was a lot of concern in South Dakota that there was going to be too much because they like to kind of stay under the radar in South Dakota, and there was too much exposure, to what happened there. But it is kind of settled down and moved on, and there's really I don't foresee there being any concern of anybody that uses privacy strategies in South Dakota would have because of the resulting from the Pandora Papers.
I agree from my limited perspective, because the question is who would force South Dakota to stop this? I mean, the federal government. If you're doing this strategy, the federal government, the IRS, the federal IRS is still getting their cut, so they're happy. And South Dakota is competing against other states, and these other states can't necessarily, force South Dakota to give up this program. So I do think there's longevity. I agree at the nonsense of the Pandora Papers and the Panama Papers. This kind of summarizes it in a nutshell, Dallas. I was listening to this, or I was watching this, documentary on the Panama Papers, and it's all spooky music, all these people hiding their wealth, etc. And at one point in the middle of the documentary, which by the way I was fascinated by, I was thinking, wow, this sounds like a good idea. I want to put my money in these trusts and offshore companies. This sounds fantastic. But I guess it was a bad thing according to the way they were portraying it. But in the beginning or in the middle, they said, we haven't found any cases of wrongdoing or something like this. And I was like, well, exactly. In most cases, this is perfectly legal. You have your money. You want it to be elsewhere. That's what anybody would do. And let's emphasize, Dallas, you're right that they pick and choose. The biggest tax evaders in any country are the working class people, right? Our working class people who are paying in cash, who are not reporting X, Y, and Z. They are the real tax evaders, if we want to be perfectly honest, right? Because they're the ones who can get away with it. That person complaining on Huffington Post about some person evading their taxes has probably proportionally evaded more taxes than anybody else. So complete rank hypocrisy. You have a right, you have a moral obligation to protect your money, and to do so through geo arbitrage or any other way that you see fit. And that's the end of my soapbox. Before we get into a privacy post, just a couple of other questions. Do you have any thoughts on for the lifestyle of people? Let's say they get their South Dakota nomadship. Any kind of lifestyle ideas for making sure that they don't get claimed by other states, or just kind of other lifestyle considerations now that they've committed to being a nomad, let's say?
Yeah, I think what's really important is to understand the laws and the rules and the case law in your state. So every state has a little different variation. Most of them, go to the 6 month rule that if you're in the state less than 6 months, then you could consider yourself not a resident. You could categorize yourself as a non-resident. And so people that have, let's say a place in Arizona, a place in Florida, and they really need to look and do the math and throw it on a spreadsheet or whatever and make sure that they're not in a specific place long enough to be then considered a resident. And I think that's really important because I think there was a time where people were just loosey goosey about it, and they just like, you know what, I don't care. I'll be a resident of this Midwestern state, or Illinois or whatever, because I spend most of my time here and I have my family and my job here. But I go to Florida for 3 months out of the in the winter, 4 months, whatever. Now I think people are more aware of this and saying, you know what? I'm tired of these taxes. I'm tired of these politics, and I'm tired of and the crime increasing. I am going to spend 6 months in one week in Arizona or Florida, and then I am going to spend 5 months, here in Illinois. Just I like to pick on Illinois. I'm going to spend 5 months in Illinois. So it's really important, yes, and I think people have to really look at a strategy and figure out what that works. I highly advise against, and we do not, if we discover it through the services we provide, we will flag, and they're out. We won't do business with them. People who like I said, they pick and choose, they cherry pick. Yes, I want to be a South Dakota resident, but I'm really in Illinois all the time, and so forth. And I'm trying to fly under the radar, and they're setting themselves up, especially now as taxes are getting, you know, they're just bringing more and more taxes out of us, and these states and these counties, they need more taxes. They're getting more observant of, who's doing what. And one thing that's really important, Gabriel, to understand is if you ever get questioned by the state, especially the sticky states, if you get questioned by a state like, we think you're a resident in our state, let's say the state Department of Revenue sends out that good old registered letter, says, we think you're a resident of our state, blah blah blah, and then it's a burden of proof on you. It's more of a civil crime, so it's burden of proof is on you. You need to prove to the state that you are not a resident of that state. It's not the burden on them to prove that you are. The burden is on you to prove that you are not. And they have us, every state's different, but they have like a top 5 or 6 list of things that they look for to see if you are a resident of that state. So that's very important. You got to think about your whole strategy. You can't just say, "Oh, I spent a day in South Dakota. Yay, I'm a South Dakota resident. No more taxes. No more expensive license fees for my plates."
Of course, we're not giving any kind of legal or tax advice. We're not in a position to do that. We're just talking information. And of course, what I'm about to say, I never encourage anybody to break any laws or anything of this sort. I will say that if you're doing the nomad residence lifestyle through South Dakota in the U.S., you would want to obviously follow the privacy practices that I talk about in my book, for example. So let's say you have a online business. You're not an employee anywhere. You have an online business, and your online business address is in South Dakota. And let's say that you practice, when you park wherever you're parking for the night, have a magnetic license plate that you take off so nobody can see where you're from, and you protect your GPS location so that there's rarely a trace of where you are and where you're going. And you practice things like finding housing without connecting your name to it, temporary housing without connecting your name to it. If you do all of these things, then you are living the kind of lifestyle that will easily qualify you to be a South Dakota resident with no trouble from anybody else. And we'll leave it at that. So Dallas, let's talk about privacy posts specifically. But let me set it up like this. So if one is interested, somebody's listening and saying, "Wow, South Dakota, that sounds interesting. Have a different address that's not attached to my real name. Have the ability, if I commit to it, to live in a state with no income tax and various other benefits, and maybe use that as a launch pad to become an international nomad where I don't, owe my taxes to Massachusetts or one of these other states." They're feeling that they search for a virtual mailbox in South Dakota. There's a lot that will come up. There are a lot of big companies that have profited immeasurably from this and from RVers especially. And a lot of these services have all kinds of various problems, but especially privacy problems in how they handle your important data, because you're giving this company photocopies of your identification, and you're giving them important information, and they're receiving mail from you, such as, for example, credit cards and things like this, and they're scanning those things, and they don't always have good privacy practices in mind. And you at Privacy Post, that is one of your focuses, is to have privacy at the root level. So tell me about, how does Privacy Post distinguish itself from the other popular options out there for virtual mailboxes in South Dakota?
Night and day. So that's one of the reasons why I created Privacy Post for myself, because I just every service I used in South Dakota failed miserably, miserably. Um, Janky cloud services. I just would go into those services, and I'm just looking at these, and like, and in doing some non-invasive analysis of the security of them. Some of them, they don't even have an SSL, an updated SSL certificate, and so forth. So I finally said, I'm just gonna, I started making my own service, and I'm like, I'm just gonna turn this into a business, because I just love this and I think it's important. It's going to be a small niche service, but I think that is, as time goes on, as our economy and our culture evolves to, you know, the greedy rich now are people that, make close to, six figures now. You're a greedy rich person. And so yeah, and so that's why I put it together this way, and that's why I built it intentionally from the ground up to be more privacy focused.
Let's get into some of the specifics here. So before and after. So a lot of these services, they will scan your mail and they're using a third party, and we don't know how long that stuff is being stored on their servers. And as you were telling me, sometimes they just hire high schoolers who download an app on their phone and they go in to scan this stuff. Who knows where that data will end up? And this is important stuff. As we said, this is letters from the IRS that are being sent to you, legal notices, credit card numbers, all this kind of stuff. You get around that entirely. You don't even have a service that you, or a third party necessarily per se, that you use. How do you handle the important central feature of scanning documents that are sent to somebody using your service?
Okay, so let's start with that first part there's a lot to unwrap here, but let's talk about what we were talking about before the show about these other services. These more of these, the top two or three that come up on your searches, that are paying a ton of money in SEO to get up on the top of those searches. And I'm telling you, Gabriel, the SEO, the virtual mailbox, virtual mail service, that is a very expensive keywords for SEO. Terribly expensive, to do that. So them at them on the top, and these are they're curating that. They're not just because people are they whatever. So, but those services, some of them, I'm not going to give names, but they have an app that the operators, that's what the services that actually are receiving the mail, the local, mail shipping service, they say, okay, we're going to third party through your service to bring more people in to use our mailboxes. And some of those services will have an app that people put on their smartphones. And I have spent time, I've watched, I've seen, I've asked questions, and I've seen how the process in some of these places. And they will typically, a lot of these places, they'll have for 2 3 hours a day, they'll have a high school student or a young adult come in with their own devices, BYOD, have the app on their phone and scanning the mail and putting it into the mailbox, the virtual mailboxes of the clients. And that was like, yeah. I have no idea the level of privacy and stuff. Are those pictures staying on the phones and stuff? Who knows? Can someone see something interesting and take a picture and keep it on their phone? I'm sure they could do that. So that's that part. So, anyways, with our service, what really is important to understand is we do not own your mail. When you are the third party doctrine. Think about the third party doctrine. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, look it up. It's a very simple Google search, and you will see all you want to see about third party doctrine. Your mail, you don't own your mail anymore. When it is scanned into a service and put into a cloud service, you do not own that mail. You have access to it, so forth, and you probably have some legal rights to delete it, but it is not your mail anymore. And so that's very important to understand as far as retention of your mail, who has access to that, who can subpoena it, and so forth. They don't have to come to you because it's not your mail. It's not your property to a degree. And how we operate is everything we have designed is to minimize that your mail is in your possession at all times. There's a caveat to that. When we receive your mail, it's in our possession. When we scan your mail, it's sent to you. We will hold your mail for a predetermined amount of time. And in that a predetermined amount of time, you can say, I want it forwarded to me. This is something important. I need the physical documents. I don't know, it's a stock trade or something like that, or a portfolio paper, blah, blah, blah. Um, or shred it. Once we shred it or send it, physically send the mail, we no longer have access to the historical record of your mail. We don't have anything. If anybody comes to us and says, we want all of the mail for, mailbox 2121, give it all to us. Give us access. We want to see everything. We'd say, sorry, we don't have anything. Here we have 30 days of letters in their mail, but their physical mailbox that they haven't been forwarded on yet. But that's all we have. Sorry. Okay, so that's really a key differentiator between our service and everything else. We minimize the retention of our clients' data, so we don't even have to say, try to quash a request. We don't have it. We can say, sorry, yeah, sorry, we don't have anything, or this is what we have. We have 5 letters in the mailbox. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So what is the application or device that is doing the scanning, and where and how is it sent to the customer?
Okay, so for OPSEC here, I'll be vague. So we do not scan anything into any cloud service. We our devices are not our scanning devices are not hooked up connected to any network. The scanners themselves, they are scanned into a stations that then move that mail into primarily Proton Mail, and then we mail through Proton Mail and through the security features and the privacy features of Proton Mail, we send that to our clients. And so a requirement for our service is to have a Proton Mail account. We just started supporting Tutanota as well. But our primary is Proton. If people don't have a preference, we say Proton. If they do say, oh, we're already using Tutanota, and then or I want to use Tutanota, then we'll start scanning to Tutanota. With Proton Mail's new licensing pricing and stuff, it was a little concerning for me, and so I then brought in Tutanota and started using that as an option as well.
So Dallas, I think of a virtual box option, such as what we're describing Privacy Post, similar to a VPN where you're offloading an address that's kind of tied to your identity to another entity. And that is fantastic in terms of privacy practices, but it also means that you have to trust the person you've offloaded that essential part of your identity to. All the people working for you are expected to be savvy in cybersecurity. So let's use your competitors, the other main options out there. You can give them a call. You can say that you're so and so, and you can kind of see what mail has come in. You can get extract all kinds of information. It's really bad in that regard. These other companies, right? The virtual mailboxes, they're handling something that's very important, but they do not consider proper OPSEC in doing so. So how do you handle that specific scenario? And what do you mean when you say that all of the people working for you are expected to be savvy in cybersecurity?
Yep. Yeah. So it's almost it's I kind of gave you the analogy of a Marine, or even you learn how to be a soldier first, then you learn your expertise. And so no matter what you're doing in the Marines or probably any branch of service, your primary role is to be proficient with shooting a gun and defending, or whatever you want to say, going to war, I guess. But anyways, and so we take that same basis. Everybody, cybersecurity is not a department. We vet with specific questions and so forth about cybersecurity and practices for their own data privacy and data protection, and then we enforce that, and we have training modules for them, and very clear guidelines and rules on how they are to be professionals and proficient with the protection of data and cybersecurity. So that is kind of ingrained in our very small culture that we have, and it's like I think it's a really important, on the from the foundation of a company to make that a priority and not say, oh, we have to grow fast. We got to grow fast. Let's put this on the back burner for now, and then when we get to a point, then we'll revisit this and make it important. And that never happens. That point never comes. So from the get go, we hire, we train, we enforce, we encourage, we are yeah. And there's so many cliche salesy words that people would use. That it's in our DNA, right? That's such a cliche one, but we really do it make cybersecurity the focal point of. They are cybersecurity expert first. And I don't care what they're doing. I don't care what their role is. If they're administration, if they're taking care of the books, they are cybersecurity experts. And I do extend that a little bit to the professional services. We do have conversations, and I do have specific expectations, and I do have a list of requirements for them of where is my data stored, how is it accessed, is multi-factor authentication used, and so forth, to understand the vulnerability that professional service could have of our information, because you have to depend on your B2B to be successful. So yeah, so it is a very passionate part of me building this and building a team that understands and gets that.
Right, and I'll just highlight some of the other bullet points that you have on your website in terms of privacy. You have private, secure ways to get in touch with you via wire and signal and etc. You make use of warrant canaries. You allow people to pay in crypto and cash and other ways. Are there any other kind of bullet points that you would like to hit in terms of how you advocate and implement privacy into your business?
Yeah, and I think the really important part to differentiate when we were talking about that, there's so many pieces to that to cover, but we have no reception in our office. We have no public entrance in our office. Obviously, the building we're in is really part of what our sale is, and what we, the feature that we sell is that we are in a professional looking building with the street views and so forth. But as far as getting into the building, there is no public entrance into the building, the entire building, and it's a multi-tenant building. There's no public entrance. You have to get buzzed in by each of the tenants to get in the front door, unless you're a delivery person. And in our office, there is no signage in our office. We are not on the directory of the building. To come into the building and say, I'm going to go up to a privacy post and I'm going to social engineer to get into a mailbox and grab the mail. You can't do that. There's no place to go. And if you do figure out where we are, the staff are instructed not to answer the door. And we have video cameras outside to see who it is first. And they don't answer the door. They're not like, hey, who is it? So those aspects are very important, and important to understand how what differentiates us from most of the services is that there are several layers of physical privacy as well, to minimize or eliminate the social engineering aspects of it. And as far as the employees, not we don't have uh, part-time employees coming and going. Retention is always something to be concerned about, and getting the right people to be long term is we're getting better at it. But if you don't have the right person there, you don't have the right person. But to have this minimum wage person or whatever coming in to do basic stuff, we don't do that. We have professionals in doing the work and getting paid well to do it, so that we can retain them.
Broadly speaking, what are some of the other services that Privacy Post offers besides just being an address for somebody's personal or business life?
So if a small business, a virtual business, is really thinking about where they want to start or where they want to move to, we offer physical addresses within our offerings, within our services, so that your address for your, if you want to have some assimilation of a presentation of being, not, how you'd Google some addresses, Gabriel, and you street view it, and it's a UPS store, or UPS store, right? If you want some simulation of a professional image, we can provide that with a mailbox address that is not attached to a CMRA, and it is in a box number that is legitimate to say, yeah, that's a suite number. That's not, you see these people with, my business address is Suite 100 dash 2592 100th Street. It's like, wait, what? We can provide addresses. Our premium addresses are in that like actual Suite 200. You know, your 112 South Main Suite 200. It's a mailbox, but it could be a legitimate suite number, right? So that's very important too. Now, going beyond that, the services we provide, we do concierge services for residency in the state of South Dakota. So coming into the state, we can help with the whole process and getting the titling of the vehicles and switching over a to a trust and so forth. We can and we do that all concierge. It's very it's very VIP almost. I would say we're very much about providing a very specific service to our clients, and doing it very privately and securely. That's another feature. You'll see so many services. They're like, okay, we'll download this form and this form and this form, your vehicle registration, your affidavit that you're a nomad, blah blah blah, your maybe your 1583, and then just mail it to us at our Gmail account. And it's like, we will never allow that. We will never ask for you to do that. And another bigger service is people who are looking at a more international strategy. That's really where we differentiate ourselves from all other services. We do not focus our services on the typical full timer, the RV person. That is not our sweet spot. We don't focus on them. We would look at them coming on as clients if let's say they're a professional that says, I'm going to go on the road and I'm going to be a remote or a video a remote doctor, let's say, or something like that, or an attorney, or I know attorneys that do this as well. That I'm just going to go from my big pusher, my big RV. I'm just going to travel around the country, and I work all remote. I do everything through Zoom. Yes, we would take those on. But the typical retirees that just want a mailbox just to say they're in South Dakota, that's not our sweet spot. And they wouldn't even really value our services because, they don't. They're just looking for they go for the 9.99 service because all they need is an address. And then going beyond that is this back to this international plan is because I'm an expat, I can help other people and do help other people with their international strategy for geographic arbitrage and what you need to do in the U.S. to extend this out to your international plan. Now, we didn't really talk about this, Gabe, but most people don't understand this, and it is not that easy. It is easy to do, but you have to follow specific guidelines. But the Foreign Earned Income Tax Credit, FITC, if your first, I do believe it's now up to like 115,000, maybe 120,000. Your first, if you are if you live internationally and if you meet the requirements, your federal income tax, the first hundred and let's just say 10,000 is credit. You don't pay you don't pay federal income tax. So if you take that federal income tax off of the first 110,000, you have a side business where you have an LLC, whatever, and you maximize your write-offs in that side business, and you live in you claim a state of residency where they don't have any state income tax, you can be practically tax-free, both federal and state, up to the first 110, 120,000 of your income, and that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, to be clear, if you are a privacy and freedom seeker, that what you just described is the route that you should be considering.
Absolutely. Years ago, when I was a kid, reading the detective magazines and saw this, have a second passport, be the international man, and I just had like that made sense to me. And I've always desired and seeked like someday I'm going to have a second passport. I'm going to live internationally. I'm going to have my boundaries are not going to be defined within a state or a country. I'm going to start planting flags around the world. And I really think, especially with how crazy things are getting these days, it can't be a plan of 1 year. You really need to start be thinking, even if it's like you got kids in school, maybe high school or whatever. It's a 5 or 10 year plan. So and to start that now in baby steps, incrementally, it is so much more achievable than just saying, when the youngest kid graduates high school, I'm going to become an expat and I'm going to make all these changes. And it's really a big challenge to do that. So we can help with that as well. We can't help with the legal planning and the accounting. You really need to bring in your professionals for that. But if you have your professionals say, hey, you need to move to South Dakota, you need to change your residency to South Dakota, so forth, we can help you.
Now, let's say somebody's listening, Dallas, and they say, well, this seems intriguing, starting with South Dakota residency. Let me look into it. Let me formulate my own questions and discover them and then pursue it. And then they end up coming to your service because they like your privacy emphasis and the way you think and your business practices and the ability to pay for your services in private ways. So they come to you and they want to get they want an intake form. They want to apply to use your service. What do they need to give you, and what are you screening for? What kind of things are you screening for? Because presumably you have to reject people who are particularly suspicious. So what are people required to give you, and what are you looking for? What are you screening for in your intake process?
Okay, so the first one would be I get a lot of requests that are sent to me that kind of get flagged in our process as being a little suspicious or just not making sense. First of all, everything can be through Proton Mail, and then you know people can reach out directly through Signal, but having long conversations back and forth on Signal really isn't that optimal. We typically move over to Signal once the process starts, but we can have a quick question or something on Signal. But having it going email completely private within Proton Mail is the way to go. And even if you're even more suspicious or more concerned, just create a burner Proton account. Don't use your primary one. And if you want to do that, and do Proton, have got a couple that try to go through like simple logon and stuff, and then I go back to them. It gets forwarded to me, and then I say, hey, I have no problem talking with you on through simple login, but you realize now we're these messages, this conversation is in the clear. You're shielding your Proton Mail account, but then these conversations in the clear, and then like, oh yeah, you're right. So then they go back over to Proton. So really, starting in Proton is fine and it's good. And if you have some basic questions, even some detailed questions of what your scenario is and stuff, I am okay. I typically will create a pseudonym for you and or an alias by the name of your email account, and I'll just call you that for a few iterations. But when it gets, I've it's been a process when. The complicated ones get to me, and then we start this round of back and forth of emails, and and then there's just what if this, what if I'm getting the point now after like two or three iterations. I'm like, okay, we're done. You know, if you want to talk more, and what I've been doing is outside of privacy posts, but more with the international things, I say, okay, we're done having these basic conversations back and forth. It's really not going anywhere. If you want to continue this conversation, there is $100 an hour consultation fee. Prepaid, and then we can continue to have this conversation because people just it can't scale when people are answering all these, asking all these questions. So that is a big piece to this, and that's what. But we do offer that kind of that personal concierge service. What the things that get flagged and sent to me are, and I'm not joking, Gabriel. When people start a conversation with, I see that you cash checks, which is not true. I see that you cash checks. Can I send you checks? And then can you send me Bitcoin? And I get those, and it's like that's absolutely so.
So I totally sympathize with you, and for people who are interested in services like this, keep in mind that you're going to have to give your real information for a postal box at some point. So understand what you're willing to give up. What are the requirements to information that you need to consider somebody?
Okay, and thanks for focusing on that because that's important. So we can have a few conversations back and forth, and I don't need to know any names or specific details of where either what country you're in. After the basic questions are asked, if someone says just yeah, I want to sign up, it goes right through. The team that does that. But if people have all these questions and it gets complicated, that goes to me, and then I engage in those detailed conversations. So if there's a round of questions, and then the next step would be, and this typically a lot of people disappear when this happens, is we need to know your personal identification, your personal identity, because we cannot provide a service to you if we don't know who you are. That's just setting up to go to Camp Fed.
Right.
So we do need, at some point, we need your identification, and what we do is we fill out a 1583, and then we get two forms of identification to match up to that 1583. What we do differently, though, is that information is not stored um, outside of Privacy Post, and it is not stored in any fashion that is unencrypted. So it's not going to Google Suite or Google Drive or to Dropbox or anything like that, and it stays within our control. We do not forward that on to any other service or so forth. And all of that information is exchanged through either Signal. Some people do it through Signal, or through Proton Mail. So it is all exchanged in a confidential and a secure manner that is end-to-end encrypted. Blah blah blah. But it is very important. At some point, people that don't want to give any information, it just gets to the point where like, okay, move on. We're done. We can't. How far are we going to go down this rabbit hole? But I understand we need to build trust with people. So, we are patient, but it gets to a point where we need to know who you are. Just like your lawyer needs to know who you are. Your professionals in your life, your accountant needs to know who you are.
Well, and if you need to fill out a 1583 postal form, then you're going to have to give real information anyway. So recognize that you're going to have to give real information. You're going to have to give identification, and the privacy benefit is that you now have a service working for you where you can start to get privacy in other domains of your life, and the service is doing all of its privacy practices, unlike some of the competitors out there. So you're going to have to give up something to get something. Now, tell me, Dallas, what are some What are some things that you're screening people for? Obviously, you, as you said, and that's understandable, you have a business that you have to keep on the up and up. So, what are practices that people do, or ways they use their service, where you might, give them the boot?
Yes, it's the mail that's received, especially that we're small and we have the resources, and being a boutique business that's starting up, we can really focus on the mail coming in, and any suspicious activity of what's coming in. We have not experienced this, but with other mail services and in the trade, talking to people and understanding, because that's a lot of what I do. Is what the suspicious activity. What do you look for? What tips you off, and so forth. And one of them would be people that get a ton of credit cards. They open their box and they get a ton of credit cards. It's coming into their mailbox. That's one thing. People that have too many aliases, they have all this aliases coming in. That's another thing that I have not personally experienced, but I have been forewarned about, which makes sense to me too. There's also, and this is a little bit of a challenge, because there's social media accounts for these mail receivers, and they say, "Hey, we're getting a bunch of three services in the area have been getting some scammy mailbox openings from this specific fake person's name and their fake, credentials that has a fake notary. Be on the lookout for them. They're I'm not in those circles, but that's another thing that people could be. We're not on social media and using social media, so that would be a challenge to get included in that. This is specifically to our situations where we have flagged people and actually booted them. Is if they start pretending that they actually reside in South Dakota, and we will kick those out. I'll give you an example. So, someone who comes into South Dakota, starts a residency there, and then they go to their insurance guy and say, "Hey, I want South Dakota insurance because it's like a third of the price of my insurance in Chicago." And then they say, "Well, what's your physical address? Where do you park your car at night?" "Oh, I got this address here. I'm in Sioux Falls. I'm at 1212 125th Street." And somehow they got a physical address, whether they made it up or whether they. And we know for sure that they do not live in South Dakota, because we're forwarding their mail to wherever. We will boot them. We won't put up with that. That is fraud. And people really need to be aware of that. If people want to do that shady stuff, they need to go to some other service. We're not gonna take them on. So does that make sense? Does that help you out?
I'm trying to think here with specifically your insurance, your car insurance example. So let's say somebody is taking the nomad route that we described, and they're using it to travel around the country. And so the only real address that they have is the South Dakota address. How could that person then deal with their car insurance?
Excellent question. And very few podcasts, privacy experts, or these mail services are gonna be able to really guide you through this. But we can talk about it, and I have an answer. So, what's really important to understand with car insurance, in the last few years, this is really, really, they have really, really clamped down and locked down on where you claim to park your car at night. And they need a physical address. They need a physical residential address. And if you tell them that you are parking it in a place that you are not, they most likely will not discover that for a time. But if and when they do, whether it's an accident or something like that, or if it's not a claims adjuster, but the people that review certain things, and there's probably some trails of other aspects of people's lives through OSINT that they could use to then flag people. But especially if you get into an accident or you have a claim and it's not in the state that you, and then they do a little bit of their math, they can either cancel your policy, or they can actually backdate your policy, and they will specifically ask you, "Where do you park your car at night?" And then if you lie, you're that's fraud. And then they can adjust your policy to the actual price and backdate it to the beginning or whenever you move to that location, and that can then affect you in the future to get insurance. And a specific client, I'll give you an example. A specific client was they didn't they moved states and they did not update their insurance properly, and they moved to a more expensive state. They moved to California. They were definitely, their insurance before was in the state that they were in. They moved to California. They're there for a year, or whatever. They didn't change their insurance, and they had a small little ding bump fender bender in California, and it got claimed through the other insurance that whatever the other policyholder, and their 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 policy was canceled. And the letter went not to their virtual mail, but it went to their old address, because it went to the address where they claimed that they garaged their car, which they did at one time. And it took them over a month to be notified that their insurance was canceled. They're driving around the country for a month without insurance. So it's really, really important to understand that. To get around, not to get around that, but to solve that dilemma, if you are really truly a nomad and let's say you're a travel nurse, that's a big client of ours, a travel nurse. You spent 3 months in locations around the country, and you gave up your residence. You do not have that residence anymore. To really be able to do that, you need to be labeled, identified within your insurance company as a air quote full timer. You need to be a full time RV resident. And the only way that insurance companies recognize you as a full time RV resident is if you are insuring an RV. So that's very important to understand. You need to have within your policy for your vehicle, you need to have an RV insured with that. And there's a few caveats to that can help you with your strategy. It doesn't need to be a big old Winnebago style. It doesn't need a big old pusher. It can be any RV. They really don't care. It can be a little camper trailer. It can be a pop up. It doesn't matter. So if you have a camper trailer, if you have a camper van, the other thing about camper vans is very important. It needs to be not licensed, but it needs to be titled as such. You can't take a schoolie. There are some variations that's going to get down the rabbit hole with the schoolies, but a schoolie is harder to insure because the title is not an RV. It has to be titled from the beginning as an RV so that it's classified as an RV. If anything is classified as an RV or a camper, pop up, camper van, whatever, you're golden. You can get a nomad insurance policy and to go wherever in the country. But having said that, it is more expensive than someone who's not a nomad. So if you're doing it to save money, it may be cheaper than saying, Philadelphia or Massachusetts or Chicago, but it's still going to be more expensive than saying I'm in South Dakota. It is more expensive, and the minimum fee for annual for a car that is for a person that is a air quote full timer is the minimum is around $800. Okay, so that's important to understand too. Is $800. That's the minimum. It can go up from there. But so if people are really wanting to do this to save money, it's more about privacy. You're going to probably end up paying more in the end of the day for it, but it gives you a heck of a lot more privacy to be able to go that route.
Very interesting. I know we're some people might think we're getting into the weeds here, but for some people, this is really valuable information, especially if they've already pursued the South Dakota route and maybe they are claiming their car insurance in that at that address. That this could be news to them. This is very valuable information.
Or they assume they're going to be able to do that, and then they jump through all these hoops, and then they get to their car insurance, and the insurance agency is like, what? Well, no, not really. Yeah, you're sorry. Too bad, so
Right.
sad.
And if you're listening to this episode just to get kind of the overall idea, well, that's fine. Listen to the end and then come back later when you're really pursuing this and hone in on some of the details we're talking about. Well, so I do have some more questions. I just want to say at this point, Dallas, thank you so much for talking, for giving us so much of your time. You've really done your research in this interesting and viable privacy and freedom lifestyle, the nomad approach, particularly within the US, but also internationally. I want to ask you about international in a moment, but kind of to close the door specifically on the kind of domestic privacy post stuff for now. Are there any other questions that I didn't ask or anything else that we need to know or should be asking about privacy post before we consider it as an option?
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention, I get a little sidetracked very easy, and it's good to have someone with experience to be able to get me back in focus. But one of the things too we can do is get you our user agreement. And we can do that. You don't need to sign up first. You can even just be in the anonymous stage to get our user agreement. And it's very simple. It has gone through legal review with the legal team. We spend a lot of resources and a lot of time on on our legal team, as well as internationally. We have lawyers in other countries that work on the international aspect as well. So we take that very seriously. But one of the things we really strive for is very simple, 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 simple. And our user agreement, I believe it's less than 3 pages. The last page is mostly signature with a lot of white space. So our user agreement is very clear. It is very defined, and it is very pro-consumer on what we provide, what we don't provide, and how we're going to protect your information. And we even have wording in there about subpoenas. You know, if your data, if we do receive a subpoena, we will attempt, if we can, we will inform you that your data has been subpoenaed, unless they block that. And in certain situations, depending on the level of your box, we have so many conversations about the what ifs. And if it's the right customer at the right level, we would question that subpoena. We wouldn't just say, "Oh, okay, here it is. Here's all the information." So that's really important, that for people to be able to understand. So get that user agreement. We'll share that with you, and you can read it. It's very simple, very easy to read. An average person can read it, and it's not these scrolling and scrolling and scrolling that you never read when you use these cloud services, and you just get down to the bottom where you say I accept.
or I give in. But no, and I'll say, just if people go to privacypost.io, look at some of the details, you can tell that this is definitely a consumer friendly business. I mean, the transparent pricing, flexibility in what you're willing to do. There's wiggle room.
Yeah, could we just say that really quick, going back to the transparent pricing and stuff? And this is a huge pet peeve of mine. These, and a lot of people, and this actually, it has some good unintended consequences how we're transparent with our pricing, because we don't want I say to the team all the time, I would rather have 1,000 excellent customers using our service at a fair price, at a premium price, than having 10,000 for 9.99. And so these people that are just looking at price, they're just looking at price. And those people don't care about privacy. So they're going to come to our website, they're going to see the price, and they're going to say, "Oh, too expensive. I don't want this." But if they spend 5 minutes reading the details that we're very transparent about, it is the same price or cheaper than many of these services that say, "Oh, starting at 9.99 a month." And then you go to sign up, and oh, that's if you pay for a full year, and then really it's 12.99 or 14.99 if I want to pay monthly. Then it's like, oh, what? You don't shred? I have to pay for my documents to be shredded. Oh, you don't filter junk mail? You forward the junk mail. Oh, you scan only this minimal amount for this. Oh, I can only have one name to this mailbox. All those variables we already put in, and put those into the price, and get rid of those people that we call them the bottom feeders, the people that are just going to go to get the minimal price, and they just want to use it for nefarious reasons or whatever. Just go away. Leave us alone, please.
Right. Fair enough. You get what you pay for. And what we need to recognize in the privacy community is that the people who are putting resources and effort and time into building up these businesses, they're worthy of our support, and we need to pay people if we want to be able to have privacy and privacy services.
Absolutely.
Right. Speaking of the question of trust, Dallas, and I'm also interested in your what inspired you to do this. So who is Dallas from PrivacyPost.io? And when I say that, I mean, talk a little bit about your background, which is interesting and obviously has privacy as a focus. What did you do? What are you willing to talk about in your background? And then what kind of inspired you to get to the point where you created PrivacyPost.io?
Sure. Well, I have been in information technology, informatics, for all of my adult life and career. And being in technology, and I'll just leave it very basic at that. um, when things started coming down, two major events that hit my life, hit everybody at this, was the banking crisis, and shortly thereafter that would be the Snowden event. The banking crisis really kind of really leveled the playing field on on the economy and affected a lot of people with their lifestyle and so forth. It affected me. I was way over my head on housing, and it really impacted me on having a career, a regular day job, and then having a house continuing to lose value and go underwater, and how it in fact it just made me realize that really the debtor is enslaved to the lender. When you're working a soul sucking job to pay a mortgage on a house that has less value than you're paying the mortgage, it's very soul sucking. So then the Snowden events happening with all that everybody here is very aware of, it really made me realize between the two of them, like, wow, how private is our lives? How free are we? And so that really started me being aware of using cloud services and the information out there about us and how available it is, and that how that can be used against us, really made me go in that direction. And that's about the same time that I started then leaving the typical day job and getting decoupling from the traditional world of going to work for a company and expecting healthcare and benefits, and expecting my PTO, and then taking my 2 weeks of vacation a year, and then just have a soul sucking job, and having a car payment and a mortgage, and being chained to that kind of really opened the door when I released that, all those liabilities, that really opened up for me to be thinking more free thinking as an individual of what my liberties and my privacy, and where I want to go the rest of my life, the direction I want to go. So that really kind of was the kind of the epicenter to everything that I started. And so I really really believe, off cloud, I really believe of ownership of our data and ownership of our privacy is and especially these days, it just seems to be getting more and more 1984. It's just, it's a combination of all the dystopian novels, not just one. You can't say it's like 1984. It's like all of them. Brave New World and 1984, they're all like converging together to one master novel of the direction our lives are going. And it's just, I'm not going to participate in that.
Since you are privacy minded, you told me a little bit when we were talking elsewhere that you have some interesting, you've gone to some extremes in opting out of the system, pursuing privacy. I wonder, just out of sheer curiosity, if you'd be willing to share any of these things.
So when the banking crisis happened, and I almost lost a house. It was underwater and it sold short, but I was able to just squeak out of that barely. But it really made me think about borrowing money and debt, and how there's so many things in our lives we turn into an ATM. Our mortgage on our house, and getting these credit cards, like, oh, here's your free 15,000. Oh, you can use this zero interest for a year, or this $15,000 credit card, and how we just get sucked and wrapped up into that scam. After the financial crisis, I really, really took heart to no, no, I'm opting out of this. I am not going to borrow money. I made a commitment. I will not borrow money. I will only spend money that I have. I will only buy what I can afford, what I have in the bank or in my pocket. And since the banking crisis, I never got a loan on a car. I rented only home. In fact, that's the other thing too, is just having that long term commitment. Just scary. I don't want to be committed to a property. I want to be able to be roam and have a lease. No credit cards. No borrowing money on anything. No car loan. No lease on a car. I got rid of all of that, and it really came to an epiphany when I started Privacy Post 2 years ago in South Dakota, and I was really getting serious about moving all my banking to South Dakota. And I'm going into the banks to open my business and personal accounts, and they're do the typical information to verify who you are and stuff, and the banker's looking at her screen. And I just remember seeing her face, and she had this most perplexing look on her face, and she's like, "Oh dear, I've never seen this before. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I'm not going to get an account. She goes, well, we have a minimum credit score that you need to have to open an account. And she says, but don't worry, it's a very low threshold as long as you don't have banking, incidences where you owe money to a bank or blah 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 or closed account. But yeah, we have a minimum. I said, oh dear. I said, what's mine? She goes, you don't have a credit score. And I'm like, what? She goes, we can't find you. You're not in the credits. You're not in the system that we use to check credit. You don't exist. And I stood up and I went, yes. It was just, and she just looked at me like, how do you live without credit? And I said, I'm doing very well, thank you. And I said, it's going to be fine. I knew the answer to this. I said, send it to the compliance people. They're going to be fine with it. She goes, okay. So she sent it on to compliance, and they're fine with it. They said, no problem. Everything else clean, but that was like, and I'm like, and that got me thinking. And it was on my short list to go do all of the credit freezes. So I contacted the credit agencies to freeze my credit, and they couldn't freeze it. They could not freeze my credit report because it didn't exist. And that was like, wow. Now, in all fairness, that has changed a little bit because I did have to I've been getting so busy and traveling within the United States and abroad that I finally had to get an Amex to be able to rent a car without all the hassles. I know there's ways to do it. I would do those, but it's really getting tough to rent a car in a timely manner. It's getting to almost impossible to rent a car with a debit card. And so I just finally gave in. I got an American Express. I am going to close that soon and get a business one, which is somewhat associated to me. But so that was one of my big opt outs, and that really. And once I left and then the second opt out was saying I have to have a traditional job. I need traditional health care. People would say to me, oh, "What are you going to do about health care? You you don't have a you don't have a full time job to give you health care. What are you going to do?" And now I have better healthcare than most Americans, and I pay €50 a month for my healthcare. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah. I want to ask you about the international stuff in a moment here, but you're totally right that in the U.S. it's kind of absurd when you think about it that if you do not consistently take out debt, then you are a suspicious business partner. That's
Yes,
totally insane.
it is totally backwards.
And for anybody who's interested in an eye-opening article, look for an article called "Why Your House is a Terrible Investment."
It is.
That's an
Yeah,
eye-opener.
it is. That is such a scam.
Let's kind of lead to our conclusion here, Dallas, and let me just ask you because on privacypost.io you talk about Portugal residency. What I want to ask is why should international residency be on somebody's radar, and specifically how has Portugal worked for you and Privacy Post?
Great. Okay. So the main reason that I focus on Portugal with our services is because I live in Portugal. So I know very well how to come to Portugal, and Portugal is a popular spot for many Americans and many international around the world. People come to Portugal for a civil country and a modern country with good healthcare, good infrastructure, safe, and so forth. Portugal's a good point. And if other people say, "Well, I like France," or I like Germany," or "I like Italy," I still say, the lowest resistance to get into the EU is Portugal. To come here and become a resident is the easiest avenue unless you have family through heritage. Going through Portugal is the fastest way, so you hub out of Portugal. You come into Portugal, get your EU passport, and then you can go anywhere and live anywhere in the EU frictionless. So that's my strategy. In that, if people say that one of their flags, which I call would be Europe, I say Portugal, and that would fall under the geographic arbitrage. Going on an international geographic arbitrage is very important to your independence from air quote the system is really looking at going international, and Portugal is a good choice for a Western civilized country to go international. So, being that I live here, and especially during the lockdown, it's like I can connect these services together. People who want to come to Portugal can use Privacy Post for their domicile, in South Dakota for their domicile, and then we also help with their move to Portugal and help them start their new life, their new journey in Portugal. And doing all this as a remote worker is, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but doing it as an independent contractor is way easier. And I really suggest, people, either you have a job where you're independent enough where you can work remote, come to Portugal or go to another country, geographic arbitrage, where you have lower expenses, you have better healthcare, better access to healthcare, you have safe, you have fresh cleaning water or fresh drinking water, you have healthy food, you have a civilized country where people aren't getting murdered or crime, minimal crime. I mean, everywhere there's crime. You got beautiful beaches. You have a climate all year long where you're not being frozen half the year. I can't stress that enough to people who are really looking for privacy, is they really need to have an international footprint for that.
Last question here. As I've been going along, Dallas, I've kind of been thinking, what are the barriers to entry? The questions that anybody who is considering this lifestyle and then considering a service to help them with that, what questions would they want to know? The only other one I can think of at the moment is, clearly you're a relatively new competitor to the virtual box scene, and I suppose somebody might say, well, how do we know that he'll be around in 5 to 10 years? What would you say to somebody with that question?
Yeah, and that is a fair question, but I think our business model answers that question. It's who cares? You have all your mail. You own all your mail. You have it. The only downside would be worst case scenario if that happens, and I would like to think that's not going to happen. You just would have to find a new service and change your address, which happens to people all the time because these cloud services that say they have 7,000 addresses in the country, and you choose one of those, and it's a mom and pop, shipping store, and they think they're promised, thousands of dollars of revenue by joining this cloud service for virtual mail, and they get so much garbage and trash customers, and they just say, forget it, I'm done with this, I'm done. And then next thing you know, that address that you chose is no longer an address, and sometimes you don't know until a month later. So yeah, that's my honest and best answer I could give to that, and it's a fair one too. But I would like to say one more thing about that. Everything we do is bootstrapped, and we do everything with what we can afford to do. We don't take out loans. We don't have debt. We don't have long-term liabilities other than the lease on our building. We don't do small business loans. We don't have investors. We're mavericks, and we do what we want to do, and really our overhead is pretty reasonable the way we have structured this model.
Okay, actual final question. Let's say somebody's listening. They're saying, "All right, I'm not going to get South Dakota residency, but I want to support a privacy respecting service, and I would love to get, let's say, an address, just a second address to offload some of my privacy risk." Is that is that a feasible option, or when they sign up with the USPS form, is that an official change of address? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so that official change of address will go nowhere. So unless they inform, that's up to them. So what I say to that is people really have to look at it. What is I think a couple different things. What is your goal? Are you on this journey? I think that's one question to ask, and then maybe yes, move an address to South Dakota, and at least have that in your tool belt for now, if that's all you want. But also you have to look at what is your uh, how there's that cybersecurity word that everybody uses. What's your threat model? And I don't want to use that threat model word because that's way overused. But what are you vulnerable to? And like fairly low. I have fairly low vulnerabilities to my home address, but it's just something I want to practice. Like maybe not. It all depends on how much that you want to spend and how much time you want to put into it. But if you're on a journey and you're like, and you value privacy and stuff, and like, yes, I I want to use a service that I trust and is going to respect my privacy. And so, yeah, go for it. The other thing we do is once you come in on in the services, in and we will do also we will relay we will actually at a certain levels we really don't advertise this, but we will order we will proxy your Amazon orders for you if you want. So if you want to order, things on Amazon, on most services, where there's certain things we will not do ammunition and certain modified gun parts and stuff like that. Things that are regulated. But if you want to proxy your Amazon stuff or your other shipping, we will be more than happy to do that as part of our service. So it's going to be a little bit of a delay, and there will be a little bit more charges for the shipping fees, but not much. And it definitely provides a layer of privacy for people that really need it. So I really think the biggest thing, and we could talk about that maybe another time, or if someone wants to reach out, if you're just saying I want to get a virtual mailbox service or PMB in my state or whatever, I could definitely provide you a good list of things to look for and what's out there and what to avoid. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much my long answer to your quick question.
It's been very informative. I think that people should definitely give privacypost.io consideration, give them a look, and then consider whether or not international or national via South Dakota Nomad Residency is something that you want. I think if you think about it, there will be a few of you who might say, yeah, that definitely intrigues me, interests me. There are real, actual income benefits from doing so. It's not just a privacy strategy. And so I think this has been a great FAQ for that lifestyle and also for this service, Dallas. In the end here, anything else you want to say in closing?
I want to say one more thing. I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. And I I'm not a fanboy of your podcast, but I will say that I have really enjoyed your podcast this last year when I found it. I looked in my feed and it was like November of last year. And what I really like about you, and kind of kissing your butt here, but what I really like about you, Gabriel, is that you are inclusive. You bring in so many interesting guests. When you had JJ Luna in, and I'm like, this was fascinating to me. And your take on Bitcoin, I have learned so much about privacy on Bitcoin. I really love what you're doing for the. You're not exclusive. You're not. It's all about me, and you are bringing in and that's what we need. This is I don't want to be cliche here, but this is a group effort. This is a collaboration. This is like an open source project. It takes people and with different skill sets to all come together, and so I really appreciate that. So what I'm going to extend to you or any of your clients that you deem fit for this opportunity is, if you want to come to South Dakota and come to Sioux Falls and anytime in the future. And if you want to do a dry run of our VIP service where you can come into South Dakota with a next to zero digital footprint of your presence in South Dakota, I will be more than happy to treat that to you and bring you through the whole process of what services we can provide and what our business partners can provide, that you give up none of your identification in doing that. So I'll just leave that as a teaser.
Well, perfect, and thank you so much for that. For somebody who does not like showing your face, you are certainly the opposite of a faceless corporation. Quite the opposite. Thank you again, Dallas, and we'll have all the links, and we'll hopefully talk again soon.
Okay, thanks, Gabriel.